Hi guys, how are you today? So, I've been thinking about taxation and how truly unfair it is. And this is probably quite unpredictable, what I'm saying here, but I feel sorry for the middle classes and the quite wealthy because they're getting punished every paycheck. So, if I think about someone relatively close to me, they've got really good jobs, they earn quite a lot of money, and they pay their taxes ultimately, and they don't have any offshore bank accounts or they're exploiting tax loopholes. They're just paying an awful lot of their wages every month to the taxman. So today's episode isn't about those people that are working hard and in relative terms quite wealthy. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the taxation of the extremely wealthy elite, not ordinary people, not the middle classes, and certainly not the working classes. It's about fairness for everybody. If you want to know who really runs a country, don't look at the elections, look at the tax codes. Taxation isn't a technical issue. It isn't boring. It's not neutral, despite what we might think. It's not one of those irritations, just something that we pay and that we see on our pay slip. It's one of the most powerful political tools ever invented. And right now, across much of the democratic world, we're quietly dismantling one of the only mechanisms that prevents extreme wealth from turning into permanent power. And that's what we really need to be aware of and be afraid of. So this episode isn't about whether you like paying taxes, because nobody likes paying taxes. It's about whether democracy can survive without limits on concentrated wealth. So in the first episode, we asked whether inequality is natural or if it's designed. And obviously it's designed by the powerful. And taxation is one of those primary design tools. Taxes don't just fund schools and hospitals. They determine how fast wealth compounds. They determine who carries the risk. They determine who accumulates leverage. So a tax system answers a moral question. Should extreme wealth be allowed to reproduce itself indefinitely? Or should it circulate back into the society that made it possible, those people that are paying it in the first place? So here's the harder truth. When wealth accumulates without meaningful redistribution, it doesn't just create inequality, it creates dependency, it creates political deference, it creates a class of people too powerful to ignore and too insulated to challenge. Without progressive taxation, democracies don't just explode, they kind of tilt. Slowly, quietly, legally, and towards plutocracy. So let's look at the period people kind of nostalgically refer to as the golden age of economic growth. In the 50s and 60s, the top marginal tax rate in the US was over 90%. Across parts of Europe, top rates were similarly high. And what did that era produce? And in public infrastructure, massive home ownership growth, affordable higher education, strong trade unions, and a broad and stable middle class. So high progressive taxation didn't destroy capitalism, it disciplined it. It prevented extreme wealth from turning into dynastic political power. So fast forward to now, billionaires pay proportionately lower effective tax rates than middle income earners. So those middle class people that are earning relatively good paychecks, it's those people that are essentially upholding our entire society. And those wealthy elites are getting away with paying virtually nothing. So wealth is increasingly held in assets that appreciate faster than wages grow. And inheritance mechanisms allow fortunes to compound across generations with minimal friction. This isn't accidental, it's structural. We didn't forget how to tax, but we chose not to. we chose to give those breaks to the very rich to create some kind of trickle-down economy, which hasn't worked. So let's go back to the drawing board. So I want to ask the question, really, why do billionaires freak out about taxation more than regulation? Because regulation can be lobbied, taxation reduces stored power. When extreme wealth is taxed meaningfully, it compounds more slowly, buys less influence, and it captures fewer institutions. And this matters because extreme wealth doesn't just buy yachts, it buys everything. It buys media platforms. What I'm posting to now is owned by one of those billionaires. Think tanks, policy advisors. It buys even politicians, electoral campaigns, narrative framing. It shapes what's considered economically responsible, and it shapes what is labelled as extreme. Like, so this narrative, this rhetoric that Jeremy Corbyn and Zach Polanski are extreme, and the way that they're tarnished in the media, it sort of speaks to this kind of billionaire propaganda campaign, and it shapes what voters are told is possible. So the fact that we're told consistently that there's something wrong with Zach Polanski and his policies are crazy and they're going to bankrupt us is what is planned for them to tell us. Because otherwise, if we listen to that, then those billionaires that are controlling the media and the news channels and the politicians, they're going to be out of pocket. So try to be thoughtful when we're consuming these media sources that have an agenda. So when wealth compounds faster than democratic guardrails can restrain it, success becomes structural dominance. And the wealthiest actors in society, these people, they're spending enormous resources ensuring that taxation remains politically untouchable. So they're funding lobbying, they're campaigning finance, their narratives about job creators, like I was saying, the threats about capital flight, the fact that they're all going to leave and take their resources with them, complex tax engineering to get around things. So this isn't because taxation had ruined them, but it's because it would limit their power. If you're sitting on billions with the ability to influence legislation, shape media narratives, and fund political candidates, would you support policies that weaken that leverage, reduce your power? Most people wouldn't. And that's precisely why democratic systems need taxation to function. Because voluntary restraint is not reliable against concentrated power. They want this power. It's not about the money. They want to consolidate the power that they have and become even more powerful. So the taxation system needs to prevent that from happening. So this is the risk that we're currently facing. If wealth continues concentrating at its current pace, meaningful taxation of extreme fortunes might be politically impossible. Not because voters reject it, but because those most affected by it will increasingly shape the political environment in which it's debated. They're going to increasingly discharge more and more power to control what we vote for and what we think and how the world works. So at a certain threshold of inequality, the rules of the game are no longer contested fairly. They are curated. Democracy doesn't always collapse with tanks in the street. Sometimes it just thins out. So policy becomes symbolic, public debate narrows, and economic power governs quietly behind electoral theatre. So this isn't alarmism. It's a pattern visible throughout history. Extreme inequality destabilizes republics, and it always has. So it's time that we did something about it. So if this feels overwhelming, remember this. Tax systems are not natural forces, they're policy decisions. There are organisations working globally to push for transparency and progressive tax reform. So the Global Alliance for Tax Justice, Citizens for Tax Justice and Tax Justice Network. The links are in the description. You don't need to be a policy expert to care about who writes the rules of wealth. You just need to recognise that those rules shape your future. So think carefully about the decisions you make in that ballot box, because those are the people that have been shown to us how the billionaires want them to be shown. They're being presented to us in a way that manipulates the way that we think about them. So think about the narratives that they're pushing. Are they pushing for reduced tax for the billionaires? Then we can assume that those people are having their strings pulled by somebody a little bit higher up in the hierarchy that has more sway than they do potentially. So taxes are not punishment, they're boundaries that prevent private wealth from becoming permanent political control. That's what we're trying to avoid here. Every society must decide, do we want unlimited accumulation? Do we want these billionaires to become trillionaires at our expense? Or do we want a truly balanced society, an equal society? Because we can't have both. So guys, as ever, I just want to leave you with my little sign off. Keep questioning who holds the power and why. And we'll see you soon. Bye for now.